Hi, Pradeep. How are you doing today?
Hey Sumit, good to see you. I'm doing good.
Yeah. Why don't you share a little bit about who you are before we jump into the main conversation?
Oh, sure. So currently, I'm an entrepreneur trying to build something in the Web3 space. Prior to this, I have been an engineer, been a product manager, been an organization leader for the past 2 decades. I have been pretty lucky to be at some leading organizations across India and Southeast Asia. I have got some very good opportunities to lead some teams and build some very interesting products. So that's briefly about me. Otherwise, from my personal side, hey, I'm a family man. Have 2 kids and with settled well with wife and family. So that's about me. And in terms of interests outside work, I try to do some reading up once in a while, right? And also trying to give back to the startup community, which has given me a whole lot of things in the last 2 decades.
Thank you, Pradeep. I love it. I love that you gave a big picture, right? And not just spoke about your title or what do you do for work, but included your passions, your hobbies, your family, and everything as part of describing yourself. So we have been working it together for almost 10 months now. Can you share a little bit about like before you started to work, how were things like and why did you decide to work with me?
Okay. First of all, Sumit, before we even get there, I just want to be tremendously thankful for all the journey that we have gone through in the last 10 months. It has been really amazing. And thank you so much for taking me through this journey. So just to give people who are looking into this some perspective on how did this journey start. It started sometime in the middle of 2021. And this came out because of two things. So unfortunately, I got infected with COVID. I had tested COVID positive last year and then went through some really tough times, mainly because we had this was at the peak of wave two in India. When there were a whole lot of casualties, and this was like a massive rise of infection all across the country. And I did lose a few friends and a few of the elderly family members. And somehow I thought that, hey, man, my number is also there, and then it would affect me as well. So essentially, I went into some kind of a anxiety slash depression kind of a spiral at the time. And then thankfully I recovered, everything went well, and probably all of these were just things that I had in my mind. And then I was trying to, essentially I'd taken a small kind of a break, and then I was trying to say, hey, maybe I should be a career break if you want, to go back into a leadership role that I had. And naturally, I was thinking back to say, hey, why am I doing this? And why should I be taking this role? And then this role was slightly larger than the ones that I had done earlier. So I was also slightly skeptical. And the other interesting thing was all of this was happening during the pandemic when the offices were closed and everything was remote. And I somehow had an assumption or an assessment, as Sumit would say, about myself that would say I only operate well in a in-person setting. So these are some of the challenges. One is coming out of the COVID infection. Second, I was taking a large role. And third, I wasn't sure whether it would work well in a remote setting. So I did reach out to you to seek help on two or three areas. One is to say, hey, how do I take charge of my life? Because there are a whole lot of things that pull me into various other directions. Second, how do I take charge of my career? And then third, essentially, how to build things, like how do you become the leader that I wanted to be. I think that's how the conversation started. And I'm very glad that, hey, we continued our discussions. And I'm very happy to be where I am today.
Thank you for sharing that. And I remember when you joined this company, you had this goals for the first 100 days or the first 3 months, something like that. Can you share a little bit about what they were and how did that go after we began the coaching?
I think the goal was first, like as I told, I had this assessment that, hey, working remote is going to be really tough to be able to build relationships. Second, to be able to build influence across a larger organization, or to be able to get them to align on an outcome that you want to drive them towards, and then get them to execute on that alignment. So I think those were a couple of things. Third, also, like I was required to build a team from the ground up. So these are three challenges, right? I think in the first 3 months, thankfully, because of some of the key learning the first 3 months was most of my assumptions were just my own assessments. They were not real, right? I think that was the biggest unlock for me. Once I went in there, then probably I was able to question a bunch of my own assumptions and assessments and said, hey, I need to get hesitancy in many scenarios and my own fears. I was able to overcome them. And then I was able to build good relationships across the organization, build good alignment across the organization, what we want to do, and get the execution going as well. And thankfully, I got lucky enough to be also build a team that essentially is probably one of the best teams that I could think of in terms of how they're executing right now, doing some really amazing things. So this is definitely helped me a lot.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit more about that? Because I'm sure anybody who is listening to it is quite curious to like how did you change that assumption or that thought about yourself being like good in only a certain kind of environment, which in this case was an in-person environment. So what did you do differently? Like what actions did you take which helped you move there?
So I think there are a couple of things, right? So one is that there was always this belief that being in person, you are able to gauge and understand how things should go. So then I started to say, hey, all that is required is to bring the authentic self of yours in whatever mechanism or means that you get to discuss with other people. So I started reaching out to people through phone calls, Zoom calls, or whatever. Any and every person who was ready to take a meeting and do those calls, meets, and all that. And then participate in larger discussions after that, ping people and ask, hey, how are things? And that way I was able to build that relationship. So it was like something like, how do you initiate a water cooler conversation? So one thing that I loved from our discussions was essentially like when you reach out to people, right? So it doesn't always have to be just related to work. So I would usually start conversations with, hey, here is who I am, here is my family, here are some of my passions, interests, and all that. And only after having 2 or 3 rounds of such conversations, once the connection was built, then they would go talk about, hey, here is what we need to do for the work. And it came as a request that I make to say, hey, here is my request to you. And can we do this thing together? Rather than like maybe early days, I would do things like, hey, this has to be done. And I don't know what you have, but you need to do this thing. But this came more like a request. And naturally, people responded well to that. And it worked pretty well for me. I think thanks a lot for that.
And can you share the journey from like those 3 months period to now? Where are you today?
Oh, yeah. I think to be very honest, the journey has been fantastic from that. So what I loved about this entire conversations that we had was now if in case people ask me, who are you? Like I would shudder at answering that question earlier to say, who are you? Because somehow I thought I never had too much of a colorful past. Like I worked across government, worked in academia, worked in private setting, worked in an NGO setting, ran a bunch of projects on the side. I would struggle to explain who I am. And naturally, I would say, hey, here's what of these things earlier and all of that stuff. It's okay. One key learning that came through was, who are you is nothing but what your cares are. And I think what the deployers has helped me was to arrive at what my cares were. Right. So the 4 cares that I was able to work closely with Sumit, that essentially got me good grounding of, hey, what am I after? What do I care about? And how do I take care of me? So one example, probably of the 4 that I can pick up was, I had this vague idea of work-life balance. Right. And the thought was always to say, man, I'm feeling guilty that I'm not giving enough time to family. I'm feeling guilty that I'm not spending time with my parents, all of these kinds of things. So it was mainly driven through guilt. And I was trying to say, hey, somehow I need to provide that balance. And I always thought that the balance would come in terms of time. I am giving X a number of hours for work, and hence I need to give X number of hours here as well. And that was my naive understanding. So one clear transformation that has happened is, it is not about the time. It's about the care of your family or your parents that you care about. They care about being with you. They care about spending quality time with you. If you take care of that care, even if in case you do it for half a day in the whole week, or you do it for half an hour the whole day, that is good enough. And you are able to achieve that balance that you wanted. Because at the end of the day, it's all about, are you taking care of the cares of the people you care about? I think that was a massive revelation to me. And the guilt of, oh, I'm not with my family has gone into, oh, I'm taking care of the cares of the people around me. So that transformation has happened. I think really amazing outcome after that.
Yeah. And I know that for many people, just identifying that there is something which they care about and which they are not spending time or which they're not being attentive to can also bring up more anxiety. And you said you started in a state of anxiety. So can you share how has that state been now? So how has anxiety transformed or that guilt? And after taking care of identifying and taking care, how what's the transformation there?
Yep. So, very interesting. When I think I first spoke to Sumit, I talked about I feel that I'm living the life of Forrest Gump. Right, I am in a constant race, and I don't know what I'm running away from. I don't know what I'm running towards, but I'm continuously running. And this was characterized by me working nonstop, like 21 years straight, never having any break in between. I would be usually, even if it is when I'm switching jobs, I would leave one on a Friday and join the next one on a Monday, and the whole thing would go on. And then, fortunately for me, things went well because I was able to build upon the another. I got good success in the career. I built very large teams and did some really amazing things thanks to the amazing teams again. So I got lucky there. The whole thing felt like you may not have control on what you're doing, right? And second, you may not have clarity on the end goal that you're going towards, right? So this is essentially unsettling because you're always anxious to say, hey, are you running fast enough? And okay, is this a goalpost that you're running after? And you start questioning yourself. You have all these conversations with yourself to say, hey, are you on the right track? Do you know when you have reached? What is all of these things? So identifying the care essentially became a very, very good framework to think back from. And one thing I love, I can still relate to is, it's good just ask me this question. Hey, what happens after you finish running? What happens after you get to where you want to get to? Just imagine that you're there and then work backwards from there to say, hey, what would change or what would you be ready to give up? And that essentially changed the way I looked at all of this. I stopped thinking everything as a race and started saying, hey, it's time to smell the roses, enjoy the journey as it comes along. And I think probably we'll talk about this next to ensure saying, hey, I am on this journey. Now I can say I'm committed to this journey. So there will be the change that has come through. And I know why I am doing what. And if in case, whenever, of course, it doesn't mean that the doubts are gone and all of those things, they still do come back, but I know how to silence them. Essentially, the exercises that we did around centering oneself, leaning forward, sometimes leaning backward, sometimes all of these kinds of things, and how to be connected with oneself. For example, the easiest example that I could take up is when I started the conversations with you. So it was probably the last August, and I used to be always in a hurry. Like I used to go really, but now I'm slightly more calm, slightly more centered, and the pace at which I talk is slightly lesser because I'm not in a hurry. I'm not in a race. I know I'm on a journey and I'm feeling comfortable about what I do. And whenever I do feel that discomfort once in a while or that self-doubt, I again apply this formula to say, hey, center myself and know that, hey, you're on a journey and know that you are, these are the cares that care about, and it helps me come back to normal. So that's been really good.
Wonderful. Yeah. So I'm also curious to hear, right? So now you're smelling the roses, you are in this journey, you're not racing. What results has these produced in your life? And what were the results that were expected, that were you going after? And what were some of the surprising results that you have produced?
I think a couple of things. There are a bunch of things. So one is that at a personal level, I used to have a whole lot of anxiety. So my anxiety levels have come down a lot. That allows me to operate from a sense of calm. So that definitely is the biggest one. Second thing is, given that I started giving more attention to the cares that I care about, I do have a very good relationship with family and people around me that was earlier predicated by guilt is now predicated by joy. Everybody understands the role that I play. I understand the role I play in their cares, and then, hey, we care about each other and things are going really well. And there's a broad acknowledgement about this from people around me that, hey, I have started taking care. Right? It was always like, oh, you're not giving us enough time. Was the grouse which is always there. Now it is like, hey, we understand what you are up to. We also understand that, hey, you take care of us when you're taking care of us. So that's been the second thing. And the third thing, I think it has increased tremendously in terms of serendipity, right? So there have been a whole lot of serendipitous things that have happened. Like, for example, I wanted to be of help to other startups. And interestingly, maybe I put in a word here or there to say I'm interested in doing this. As I say, you let your intentions known to the world, and the universe conspires to help you. And I'm very happy to say that hey, bunch of people have come, stayed with me, and I've been able to help them out in their journeys, kind of make the connections they want. I've also been on a podcast where I did talk about some of my journey that I shared with a large set of people. I also did a large session on product growth that was also well received. And again, most of this I would have tried to conjure up or try to make things happen, but all of this fell in my lap automatically. So that was like universe conspiring to help me. So I think that felt really good.
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes I say that the first 6 months of coaching is where a lot of dots connect together. You really get to sense, and then after 6 months, you really start to see magical results.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about, maybe in some sense, something similar. Would that be right?
Yeah. Yep, I think definitely right. And there is also there is one care about me of taking care of my own health, and health is a very subjective opinion, and also at the same time there is no clear marker. And again, the whole thought that I had was that I'm not healthy, and by just changing that to I am healthy, I can be more healthier. Change the whole perspective. Like I started swimming a lot, and till not believe me, like there is a pool that I go to, and I started with 10 laps, and I would be tired, and now I'm able to do like on a weekend I can do 50 laps. And I can't believe it myself to say, how is that? I can sit there and do all of these kinds of things. It is just because I said I'm going to care about myself. Yeah, I think that definitely has helped a lot.
Thank you, Pradeep. Can you share a bit about what you are doing now as an entrepreneur and how that journey has been?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I started off very recently, about 4 months ago, in the Web3 space, trying to build a product. And interestingly, as we started going deeper down, the entire industry went through its own cycle. So we had to pivot to what we are trying to do. And really, this entire journey has been peppered with a whole lot of things that were out of control that had a massive say in how things would happen. So in my earlier life, I would react or overreact to say, oh, all of this is happening. The world is coming crashing down, bear market, whatever, all of that. And what is happening? But now I think one thing that I say is everything that has to be, I think, of course, so all credit to you. To say everything that has to be in control is under control. You do the things that you want to do. And as a startup founder, you need to be in that space. If I could borrow the words from my friend Ranjan, he calls it as startup founders have to be slightly delusional. You need to create a delusion that, hey, you are going to make an impact and live in the delusion because very few people around you get to understand what you are doing. But still, as long as you live in that and make things happen, that makes sense. So to be very honest, I think it was slightly tough in the beginning to say how to adopt and get things going here. But now getting the clarity, getting the calmness, and then third, I think the one biggest thing that probably I could take away from this very recent conversation was mainly around commitment. So I had this issue of what am I committed toward? Is it the outcome? Is it the journey? And what I realized is that if in case I'm asking, am I committed towards something, that means I'm not committed. That essentially brought in a safe change. And now I'm committed to the journey, the outcome, the process, all of that. So because it's commitment, right? There are no questions at all. So that has brought in a safe change. And probably what I could have done in about 2 months, I was able to take 2 days. I wrote some pretty deep documents, had discussions with the team, and galvanized them to get things going on a few areas. I think that has been incredibly helpful. So, to summarize the whole thing from the startup perspective, one is that how do you approach things that are not under your control? Because in a startup, you're a small, minute, tiny entity with a few people. You're trying to build or conjure up something that doesn't exist, which means most of the things don't go per plan. Your best laid plans are like blown off the wayside. How do you stay in control, stay calm? That becomes one key thing. The second key thing is how do you look at achieving bigger things? So one exercise that we did, where we said, hey, what do we want to do in the next 9 months? How can we do that in 9 weeks? And hey, is an opportunity to do that in 9 days? That was like mind blowing. Whole perspective of time. And now I got to realize that, hey, the minute you put in some timelines, you tend to fill it up with that. We'll come with some creative solutions of going around that. right? So some of these have been pretty helpful for me. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. The two things which I want to touch upon. One is what you said, right? Everything that needs to be in control is already in control. And I know a lot of people who are listening will basically go berserk with this, because I'm talking to a lot of entrepreneurs like you, like yourself. And I see them going like really crazy or stressed because of what is happening in the industry with VC money, and just hearing news after news of layoffs. So can you explain that a little bit, go deeper? What do you mean by everything that needs to be in control is already in control?
Okay, I think that this may appear, I think it's very subjective for people. I can give my example of how I. So naturally, when you're trying to build a startup, you are looking at three different aspects, right? One is that how are you going to build a product that your users will relate to, and what is the kind of change that you foresee in their life after your product gets they start using the product. So that is like, what is the change that you want to see in your users' life or in your customers' life? Second thing is, how are you going to build an organization that is going to make this thing happen, right? How do you hire the right people? How do you motivate them? How do you engage them? And how do you get things going? And how do you give them the vision that you have in your mind so that they participate along with that? And the third critical element is when you are having thought for the user, you're having a thought for the team, but hey, how are you going to build an how are you going to pay for all these things, make things work, right? Could it be fundraising? Could it be making the payroll, structuring things, all of this, getting all the legal, all of these clearances running, all that. And naturally, when you think of all of these multiple things, there will be probably 60 to 70% of what your plans will always go wrong, right? For example, we wanted to set up a company in jurisdiction A, right? And then we finally ended up setting it up in jurisdiction B. Because in jurisdiction A, we got the company going, but we couldn't get the banking going. So then we said, okay, it's fine. Oh, well, this doesn't work, but then we'll try something else. We went for a plan B, so we got something set up and got the thing done. Instead of saying, oh, I could not get banking done at jurisdiction A, I'm now saying, hey, I got banking done by jurisdiction B. Jurisdiction A and B are immaterial. You got banking done is the outcome they're looking at, right? So which means in your control is supposed to be, hey, you set up a company, you need a banking thing to make things work. You got it to work in some or the other way because you're saying, hey, I make it work. Yes, of course, if in case my earlier self was asked, I would cry about it and say, oh, I thought so much to work in jurisdiction A. I spent 1.5 months. I lost so much time. We lost so much focus and a lot of effort went in and nothing came out. But now I say it's okay. We got something else going as long as it is accretive to your larger journey, that's fine. So this is one example of when things are out of your control, but still you get to have the outcome that you need to make progress on the journey.
Yeah. And this brings us to commitment, right? Because what you're also talking about is that you can commit it to something in the long term, but the path to that is something which you can be flexible, or you can figure out ways. Even if you experience roadblocks, that doesn't mean anything about the commitment that you have for the long term.
Yeah. Actually, this is very interesting. Allow me to say this. It may sound philosophical, but a roadblock doesn't mean end of the road. It means probably there are other roads or there are other things around it. So I think that is one way to look at things of what is under control, what is not. As long as you're committed to ensure that, hey, the journey that you're on gets done. Block is just like maybe this closure of this road means there's some other road that opens up. So we continue on the journey. And the critical thing is just to be there to say, hey, I enjoy this journey. Right? Rather than, oh, I need to get through this. I think that was one of the critical things that probably I got clarity on about a month ago, I believe, where it was more like, hey, I have to get this done to say, hey, this is what I like doing. It becomes like a habit kind of thing. So you don't realize that you're doing it, but it just gets done because, hey, you decided that you are strong and you are doing it. And then automatically things happen along the way. So how do you get into that autopilot or auto navigate mode while keeping your destination or your journey in mind is the beautiful thing that one can build.
Yeah. And for our listeners, can you share now what is your commitment right now and what are you creating in the world with your company, with everything else that you're doing?
Oh, yeah, but I think I'm looking at this from a multi-pronged area. So, from a professional viewpoint, I'm trying to build a financial solution that will help people better take care of their finances in the crypto world. So, that is on the professional side. On the personal side, I'm committed to ensure that, hey, I am there and available and set the right example for my kids as they grow up to be responsible citizens in society. And then I'm providing enough time and support for my parents to say, hey, they feel proud about their son for all the stuff that I do and to do for the family. On the third side, I'm also very keen to be of help to people who are starting up, people who are on the entrepreneurial journey by giving them some advice, insights, or sharing some of my learnings from my journey so that it could be of help to do what they have to do. And finally, hey, I want this to be a very long journey. So for a long journey, you need to have a very healthy body and mind. Towards that, I'm trying to work towards keeping up my health, both the physical as well as emotional, so that I can last long and be able to do all the good things that I want to do.
Thank you, Pradeep. And I love how you articulate it so well and giving people a complete picture into who you are and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think this was all thanks to you. So probably if you asked me, oh, I am a vice president of product doing ABC, and that was all what I would stop it. But now I'm saying, hey, that's just not me. There are many other aspects of my life. And unless and until I'm able to look at this in entirety, everything that I say will come at some other cost. I think what I still love from this, if you ask me one key thing that I will take away, or that's been my key takeaway is, yes, you may want to do X, Y, Z, fantastic, go ahead and do that, as long as it doesn't come in the way of your cares. So what we tend to miss out in the larger scheme of things is, yes, in the pursuit of something really big, audacious and all that, you tend to lean behind a whole lot of things. And that adds up as debt. And you will have to repay that debt one or the other. Instead of that, it's better not to create the debt and ensure that whatever you do, the big thing, do the most audacious thing, but at the same time, ensure that it doesn't come at the cost of what you care about. I think that would be one key thing that I would say. Very thankful for that.
Thank you, Pradeep. I think all the credit belongs to you because you have put in hard work. You have been willing to answer those questions, which are not always easy to answer. So all the credit goes to you for who you have been and how you have changed your actions and the way you have, as you said, with swimming, with your company. It looks like a magical journey, but it involves a lot of small steps. Many of them are often not easy.
Yeah, it's good to have help. Definitely good to have help. So people, in case you are listening and thinking, is it helpful to reach out and take help? Please do that. It has been tremendously helpful for me. I wish all the luck for you in your journeys as well. And so it can be tremendous help. You just need to ask.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pradeep, for this conversation. Thank you for who you are, and I look forward to continue to play a small role in your journey forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep.